Please do be helping you, valued customer. Have you tried restarting your computer? Have you tried restarting your brain? Anyway, welcome to Common Filth Radio, where I will not respect your pronouns, I will not give you a trigger warning, and no, you do not have PTSD. Nut the fuck up, princess. You aren't a returning war veteran whose country spits on you every fucking day. What a rich fantasy life you've created for yourself, princess. You claim to yell at people, at the sandwich shop, on the bus, in the classroom, for using gendered language. There is a saying that goes roughly something like this. We sleep easy at night because there are men willing to do violence on our behalf. It doesn't matter who said it because truth speaks for itself. Let us assume this fantasy life is a reality. Let's say you do yell at people and blow their minds in public spaces when they say, "Would you like some mustard on that, sir?" Let's say that you do yell at parents in toy stores for telling their child to put down that toy because it's a girl's toy when they are a boy, or that's a boy's toy when they are a girl. Whether you believe in God or you believe in nature, either path will lead you to the same conclusion. Man and woman exist for a reason. Princess, you are embarrassing. You claim problems held by men who came home disfigured, dismembered, permanently altered. Problems that plague men far braver and far more legitimate than yourself. These are men who do violence on your behalf so that you can sleep at night. They do violence on your behalf so you can scream at the everyday person for acknowledging that God made man and God made woman. When you are encountered with the reality that humans have sexes and not a gender spectrum, you have a breakdown, or at least you claim to on your blog. You cannot imagine yourself in a war zone or a life and death situation, so I will not ask the rhetorical question. How would you feel if you were in their situation? You are too far up your own ass to imagine these things. You cannot imagine what it's like for a soldier fighting an enemy whose only goal and purpose in life is to put your head on a stake. So keep that in mind the next time you claim to be triggered or offended by some stupid bullshit. No one ever got their legs blown off because they were misgendered. I hope that one day, somebody that actually has PTSD, somebody that actually has experienced true horror, finds you. Because once they do, they will spread the word. Is this what you want to fight for? Is this what you want to die for? Is this what you want to risk your life for? So keep that in mind when you're reading everyday feminism, queer tea, or whatever the fuck else you read. So, princess, you better hope you never learn the hard way that words don't hurt. Bombs and bullets do. First question this week is from Nick, one of my favorite people. He writes, "What's your opinion on how people, if I remember right, mostly liberals, say that young children are the smartest people there are because their minds haven't been formed by the people around them? I think it's pretty much just BS, because in my experience, little kids are fucking awful to each other and their elders. I certainly don't want to say that all liberals think that, but all people who think that definitely are liberal, and it speaks to their development or lack thereof. Now, this is not to say that children are stupid just because they're children, but you cannot deny that they are inexperienced. And of course, you could say the same thing about liberals. There's the old saying that if you're 20 and not a liberal, you have no heart. But if you're 40 and still a liberal, you have no brain. But as for why liberals like the out of mouths of babes philosophy so much is because they believe that all people are blank slates and that there's no ingrained behavior in any person. It can only be learned from outside forces. Only outside forces can shape the person. This is why you see white liberals in particular making excuses for certain things that vibrant Americans do, formerly basketball Americans, and those sure are hard-working Americans. You see, this is what happens when these speech regulations are imposed through the middlemen that run these websites. We're just going to make up new euphemisms. People are still going to know what we're talking about. Anyway, back to the original point. Liberals like kids because kids are the ultimate example of the tabula rasa argument. Kids don't really know anything. Like I said, they're inexperienced. They aren't really stupid, but they don't know anything. It's in those important developmental years that they really learn how to be a part of their family, a part of their race, a part of their culture. And it's something that really can't be said. There's a very spiritual aspect to parenting that many people don't acknowledge in our increasingly autistic times. These morons who ironically believe in a gender spectrum that beep, boop, beep, two parents in a household. Gender does not matter. Except we don't have genders, we have sex, as we've already covered. Having a mother and a father is a precondition. An absolute requirement to have a healthy child. They want to fuck that up from the onset. Because by no means is having a mother and father a guarantee for success. But having a father and a father, or a mother and a mother, is a guaranteed failure. Source is Social Science Research, June 10, 2012. These are their findings on two moms versus a mom and a dad. A study released finds that adult children, ages 18 to 39, of lesbian mothers are more likely to report negative outcomes in several categories than adult children raised by married mother-father parents. Of children who had married parents, mother and father, 17% family received welfare growing up. 69% of the children with lesbian parents received welfare growing up. Currently employed full-time, 49% of children surveyed from married parents versus a mere 26% surveyed from lesbian mothers. Had an affair while married or cohabiting, 13% from married parents, 40% from lesbian mothers. Before you reflexively respond to me, correlation is not causation. Remind yourself that by doing that, you're like some scummy pharmaceutical representative telling Congress that side effects aren't really effects at all. Has ever had a sexually transmitted infection? 8% of children with married parents, 20% of children with lesbian parents. I could very well go on with these, but I think you get it. In conclusion, why do liberals like children so much? It's because they're subjects to be experimented upon, to affirm their sick yet fragile worldview. Truth speaks for itself, as I said earlier. If you need to manipulate a child into speaking whatever insane worldview you believe to be true, you're in trouble. Next up is Beverage Memes 2, the first time a question has ever been asked on behalf of a Facebook page. This fine Facebook page asks, what are your views regarding Social Security, welfare, and socialized healthcare? As someone who lives in Britain, we take free healthcare for granted and can rely on very generous benefits when unemployed or too lazy to work. Personally, I find this system mostly unnatural and a form of leftist theft that aims to redistribute private wealth. I'm interested to know what you think about the European approach to wealth redistribution and where you would draw the line for tax-funded healthcare and unemployment benefits. My European listeners, like yourself, definitely have a system in place in their native lands that We in America have, but not quite to the level that you have yet. In America, we have Section 8 and EBT. It's free. Swipe yo EBT. Shout out to Chapter Jackson. If by some chance you're listening, I'd love to have you on the show. Anyway, my worldview, as I've said on previous episodes of the show, is informed by the fact that we have had generations of dysgenic breeding allowed by a welfare state, which is in turn allowed by taxation of a healthy middle class. And maybe I haven't explained this well enough, but I think that if I explain this well enough now, it will also answer this question. Basically, what I mean by dysgenic breeding is that we're being outbred by people who shouldn't be having children. At best, the children of dysgenic practices will be bureaucrats, people who sit at desks making sure that chair doesn't roll away. Essentially, the best of what we can expect out of this dysgenic breeding are people that don't produce anything. They are middlemen. They take wealth. They don't produce it. Which is fine for the leftist class, because people who don't produce anything don't vote conservatively. Because what does conservative mean? To conserve, wanting to conserve what you have, wanting to conserve your culture, the fruits of your labor, anything, your family, whatever. The same reasoning applies to people who take and don't really work at all. They can't even bother to be middlemen. And that's where the worst of the dysgenic breeding comes in, because people who take from society in a very direct way are usually criminal scum. At their most pleasant, they're loud and uncultured. At their worst, they'll invade your home and burn it down. And by home, I mean both in the domestic sense and in the national sense. So that's why I believe that dysgenic breeding is bad all around. There's no good about it. There's nothing good about willingly, purposefully creating an underclass. And not just any kind of underclass, a permanent underclass with no hope of ever leaving it because they lack the genetic, biological drive to do so. So, beverage memes, while I am sympathetic to some poor people, I am against anything that keeps them alive past their expiration date. The European style from cradle to grave welfare system definitely does that. Remember Occupy Wall Street? Of course you do. The most shameful political movement of our generation. I bring this up because the more time that passes since its inception and supernova, the more I realize what it was really about. It was basically nothing more than these liberal 20-somethings fresh out of college wondering why they don't have a super awesome, high-paying job because they majored in their dreams. Their parents, counselors, teachers lied to them. They were told that if they were passionate about something that they would get money because they're good at it, even though they probably aren't. And they don't know how to deal with that, so they take it out on bankers, some institution that they don't have any meaningful contact with or have ever had meaningful contact with. Look, I get that bankers are real pieces of shit, but let's not pretend the filth that made up the Occupy camps were any better than them. Those places were basically rape camps, a true rape culture. These morons decided to set up rape camps because they took out loans they shouldn't have taken out in the first place, and they're like, hey, I took out a loan once. Must be their fault. Not the people who told me to major in some stupid bullshit. Anyway, I bring this up because Eric has a question, 2 questions actually, but it ties into a question I'm going to answer later about religion, which won't take very long to answer, so. I was supposed to answer this like 1 or 2 episodes ago, and I apologize to him already, so here we go. Eric's question has to do with the most shameful political movement of the previous generations. He writes, "What do you think of New Age, 1960s to present, sex beliefs such as increased openness, promiscuity, and casualty?" Reading that last word out of the corner of my eye there. Basically anything baby boomers are responsible for, I hope they pay for dearly. I hope they all die, which they will, but, unfortunately, we cannot unleash the ghetto onto their gated communities, and we have antibiotics that keep those kinds of infections from becoming fatal. I'm against the acceptance and normalization of any act that is inherently shameful. So, to use a phrase that I've used many times before, with regard to the sexual revolution, my opinion is quite simple. I do not like it. Once you begin the process of spiritual decay, it's not something that can be stopped without a holy war. I view all forms of degeneration the same. They lead you down this path of soul-destroying hedonism. And if you can't see what's wrong with that, then you're probably listening to the wrong show. You need to do some soul-searching and figure out that personal pleasure is not the end-all be-all. That you need to find a greater purpose in your life. I realized in reading the question before I hit the record button here that the question that I'm about to answer, I could have answered with the first answer that I did on this episode. But I'm going to answer it anyway because I'm a good guy, and the guy who sent me the question is a good guy. Good man. So let's get to it. The man I speak of is Tyler, and he writes, "How do you feel about the recent trend amongst parents involving the mother or father forcing the issue of gender identity onto the weak and undeveloped minds of their child, resulting in the freakishly obscene-looking children that are inevitably posted on places such as Tumblr and the Facebook page Lizzie the Leslie?" I think that it should be criminal. I think that you're treating the whims of children who really don't know anything. You're taking those whims seriously. And like I said earlier, it's funny to laugh at liberals for having such an underdeveloped worldview, as if they never advanced beyond a certain age, but when it comes to shit like this, you can't laugh at it. And I think it should be criminal to cheerlead this shit. Like, oh, that's such a brave kid. They watched Little Mermaid and now they want to be a girl. Are you fucking kidding me? People are celebrating the derailment of a child's life when they don't know anything and they're not really capable of making their own decisions. They aren't capable of making them at all. Like you said, their minds are undeveloped. And we can't neglect that their bodies are undeveloped as well. The people who celebrate this and engage in it want to play God after the fact. Because they think a child's life is worth making some important social statement. People like Lizzie the Leslie and Tumblr, the collective there. And by the way, I only know about Lizzie the Leslie because our friend Local M makes fun of the videos that bitch puts out. But yeah, those people are unhinged, and I view them as no different than crazy bums yelling at trees in public parks. I've used that example before, but I think it still stands. So if those people are celebrating this nonsense, I don't pay much attention to them because I don't pay attention to them or hold their values in any esteem in any other circumstance. But the fact that regular people are celebrating this shit and embracing it and engaging in it, that's what disturbs me. There's a complete spiritual void in public life now that people think they could just do whatever they want and nothing will happen, that all parts of life are interchangeable, that God didn't make you a certain way for a reason. They think that God didn't make you at all, that you're just some man-made entity. Because of narcissism and the acceptance of it, people think that they are their own gods. Whatever they do serves as a prayer or sacrifice to themselves, and it's usually some hedonistic pursuit, which I think that turning kids into trannies, that falls under that jurisdiction. We know what these people do is an affront to God. But they don't. It's time to start treating it as such. It will never be written in law. There will never be legislation passed making it illegal to either engage or advocate in subverting the chromosomal makeup of an individual. So, how do I feel about it? I feel that we should be our own judges, juries, and executioners in enforcing the prohibition of this deviancy. One question about kids deserves another. So, here's another question. Robert sent this in. Do you have any particular stance on abortion? If so, can you explain why you hold this view on the subject? Some years ago, I was walking home from class, and on the way there, I walked by the music building, and there's these two gutter punks sitting outside of it on a bench. One female, one male. And they were bitching about Republicans. What else? The content of what they were saying wasn't very interesting. You could go on Alternet or whatever else the popular liberal internet rag is nowadays, and you basically get the same experience as hearing these two retards talk. They're just whining about how sexist and racist white people and Republicans are for saying what you can and can't do with your vagina. You know, stupid shit like that doesn't mean anything. Now, here's where I can talk about how I went up and blew their minds with, anti-abortion arguments. But I didn't. I walked by and minded my own business because I didn't have anything to say. And I really didn't want their stink on me. See, that's the truth. I don't want to turn this into a shit that never happened blog, which is basically every social justice blogger on Tumblr. But when I was reading your question, this memory got triggered. And I haven't thought about it much until I read your question. And I do not like abortion. I think that it's barbaric and gross, and it takes away the consequence of sexual activity. Promotes sexual amorality, basically. It's just like how sodomy promotes sexual amorality. I'm against it for the same reasons. But would I care if these two gutter snipes conceived a child and then said, we're going to abort it? Because I think about how they would raise their child. I don't know if these people were boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, but let's just assume that they were. They would probably raise their kid to be a tranny or some other freak, and that kid would probably grow up wishing they were dead. So honestly, when I think of abortion, I find it viscerally disgusting. It makes my stomach sick. But when I look at the people who would have abortions and would be proud of it for whatever reason, I'm struggling to figure out what would be lost. Why would I care if some liberals had a kid and aborted it, But I feel bad for the kid. I really would, in both circumstances. If they were aborted or if they ultimately were birthed and had to grow up with such terrible people as their parents. So while I can be Machiavellian about liberals having children and how we should encourage them to abort any children that they might conceive, they don't really produce through traditional means. They're more like a virus. Liberals don't really have large families. They don't really come from that. They don't want that for themselves. How they reproduce is that they take pre-existing children from families and people more well-adjusted than themselves, they take kids from those families, put them in school, and teach the kids to turn against their parents. So that's what makes me doubt my stance on abortion. I go with my gut feeling on that. I find it disgusting that you have the option to abort your child 9 months into it, especially when there are preemies born that are significantly under the 9-month mark, and they survive. Anyway, I'm conflicted on it. But if you want to pencil me in one way or another, I don't like abortion. And I'm not calling it pro-life because I think certain people deserve to die. So, I mean, I'm against the death penalty, but yeah, against abortion. And that's how we should reframe the debate from now on. Are you pro-abortion or are you anti-abortion instead of pro-life or pro-choice? You're not pro-choice. You're pro-killing, you know? So it's not a choice because the choice is already implied by you saying that you're pro-choice. And now that I think about it, what is with liberals and being pro-abortion yet anti-death penalty? That doesn't make sense. And I think that calling them hypocrites is stupid because that's the easiest thing you can do, but at least be consistent. A baby hasn't done anything. It doesn't have a choice in being born. Yeah, the dude on death row did have a choice whether he killed those 12 people savagely, but that's more about something else than about the issue of abortion in and of itself. So if I think of anything else, I'll let you know. I'll talk about it, but right now that's all I got to say about it. But what I just said does have to do with this next question. I didn't plan this. This was a nice coincidence. This question is from Ted. Thank you, Ted, for sending this in. What do you think about the humanity of human testing? Should it be a good idea to offer prisoners who get life in prison or death penalty should be automatically opt into human testing for medical and scientific reasons? Considering that they have probably molested, kidnapped, tortured, or killed people, you would think it's only fair. Yeah, like I said, I'm against the death penalty, but upon death, donating their bodies to science, I wouldn't be opposed to it at all. But testing them like they were alive, while they were alive, rather, I have a little bit of an issue with that. I think that if we're going to do that, let the victim's family decide what they would do with the criminals. But that will never happen because we're afraid of true justice. So, as far as the state making it mandatory that all criminals go under testing, I think that's giving the state too much power. But hey, who knows, with private prisons becoming more and more prevalent, maybe you will see that, and the state won't have any power to do it. It'll be the corporations, which I am also against. I don't know if you're familiar with Unit 731, but reading about that is why I'm hesitant to be in favor of human experimentation. Basically, it was this research unit during World War II that would experiment on prisoners of war. The Japanese would they would cut open these prisoners while they were alive and do all sorts of sick experiments. I'm reading here that they amputated limbs to study blood loss. They had their stomachs removed and the esophagus reattached to the intestines. They had lobotomies. Just really awful things. So I think over-civilization is a problem. Over-civilization that allows people to make excuses for criminals, reframing them as victims and great heroes of society, whatever they want to call them. But do we want to be animals? Do we want to treat our fellow man like cattle? Like rats? I certainly think that rapists, child molesters, murderers, and so on, they deserve what they inflicted on others. But a part of civilization is taking mercy on the worst amongst us. So yes, let's treat them like the monsters they are, but let's not become it ourselves in the process. I like how these questions are kind of leading into each other, one after another. I didn't plan it this way, it's just people are asking pretty similar questions that overlap a little bit. But I appreciate that, it makes the show flow a little better. This one comes from Clarence, who would like to be a regular on the show. And I'd like for Clarence to be a regular on the show because Clarence asks good questions. And here is that good question. Do you think the current justice system should be more focused on rehabilitation, or is the way it is now working well? Well, it's clearly not working because all the justice system does is teach criminals how to be better criminals. Criminals who go through the system and get out of the system, they just end up back in it. It's like they're predisposed to this kind of behavior. And I recognize that there might be a genetic disposition towards criminal behavior. The left, however, does not. See, we agree that people who end up having a criminal record are just going to keep adding to that. We agree on that. What we do not agree on is that these people can be rehabilitated, which is why they cite the European method as something that we should adopt. That we should rehabilitate our criminals, that we should be nice to them, we should give them a hotel stay. And before I forget about it, we probably also agree on the fact that prison rape is a sign of serious dysfunction in our prison system. But anyway, the reason why I'm reluctant to agree with them that we need to rehab our criminals like Europe does is because we are not Europe. We don't have smart, productive criminals like Breivik in America. My worldview is this: America's full of the world's genetic refuse. How can genetic refuse be rehabilitated? They cannot rise above the means which contain them. This is why the European style of criminal rehabilitation cannot work. You cannot offer a helping hand to those not willing to accept it. We live in a time where everything is so well documented that there's no excuse to make mistakes. We know full well what the consequences will be. Take somebody who would try meth, PCP, cocaine, heroin. It's very likely that they've heard of these drugs at some point. It's very likely they've heard of the side effects of these drugs. It's very likely they've encountered somebody who's fallen prey to these things. Because it's not something that you can come by just walking around. You have to know people. You have to have people in your circle. So, if, despite seeing all of the warning signs, you still partake in that, there's nothing that can be done for you. And the reason why I bring up drugs is because we do give pretty harsh sentences to repeat offenders for drug possession, intent to distribute, and so on. The reason why I bring up drug offenses is because people argue that they're nonviolent offenders and that they don't deserve these harsh prison sentences. They should be placed in rehabilitation rather than with hardcore criminals. I don't know what goes on in Europe. I don't know what the common person in Europe is like. I do, however, have a very thorough understanding of how Americans are, how the American lower classes are, how the common American behaves. And like I said, we do things, our people do these things when they know they are wrong. That's the definition of a fool. People in drug rehab, they go to private drug rehabilitation centers where they live there for however many days, and they're supposedly recovered. Yet, it's something like 95% of the time, people who enter rehab end up relapsing at some point. Some people are incapable of being helped. And maybe the petty criminals, when they're young, when they're doing something stupid like graffiti or whatever, maybe those people can be helped. I understand that young people are very impulsive and stupid, and that they should be afforded some mercy, because we've all been there to varying degrees. However, affording mercy to what seem to be genetically defective people, it's stupid. Anybody who smokes meth is not worth helping. Anybody who does PCP is not worth helping. Anybody who does heroin is not worth helping. Perhaps the people who are pro-rehabilitation are right with respect to drug offenders, that they should not be placed with hardened criminals. However, let's not be so naive as to believe that these people can be repaired. As dark as this reality may be, we have to accept the fact that some people just cannot be saved. This doesn't have anything to do with anybody's question, but I'm thinking about it. It came to mind, and I want to talk about it before I forget about it. Men have a drive, an inherent drive, to father as many children as possible. And that's because we are meant to die young. Civilization no longer demands us to be soldiers. We aren't raised to be soldiers. The end result of this is a devaluation of age and experience, because more men than ever are making it to old age. And what are old men best at? Or at least used to be best at? They're usually best at governing and teaching. If a man had made it through several wars and several tours of duty into old age, chances are he had some things worth saying. The founding fathers of America knew this, which is why they wrote into law that you must be 35 years old, at minimum, to be president. These are people more capable of leading and giving their wisdom and experience to the younger generation. Now that we have a lot of old men who haven't done much to survive, these things are devalued. We now view teaching and politics as fields in which you pursue a career. People who treat these things as a career know nothing more than the technical aspects of teaching, of politics, the nuts and bolts of how to get from point A to point B. They completely miss the point that these things are made valuable by living real-life experience through an understanding of human nature that is far more advanced than most other people have. I have said many things about teachers and government employees, that they are nothing more than parasites, that these professions are nothing more than welfare for the above average IQ. Do not make the mistake of thinking that I'm going back on these words, because I am not. These jobs are still a form of very indirect welfare. However, these things can enrich society if the right people are in these positions. I cannot take seriously careerist teachers or politicians who have seen no true hardship. A man who has faced life and death. A man who has not spent his life siphoning off the productive capacity of others. If a man like that wants to teach me something, or lead me, I had better listen. Alright, next question. This one's from Andrew. In episode 3, you said academically mediocre people should work in the trades. What would you say then about the ever-reducing need in society for manual labor and non-professional jobs due to technology? What solution do you see being viable to give potentially millions of people a means of living if they were to be discouraged from attempting to follow market trends and instead aim for an inevitably shrinking job market? Humans are inefficient creatures, which is why the endgame of global capitalism seems to be the complete elimination of human labor. There are certain things right now that can't be eliminated, the aspect of human labor. which is why they're being outsourced to other countries that you can get away with paying them less than a living wage. People might think there's a lot of stability in a corporate job, but that's really not the case because of constant downsizing due to technology, like you said. But people will always need their toilets fixed. People will always need their car fixed. People will always need something fixed. Repair is not something that can be outsourced. It's not something you could put in an envelope and send off to India. Just in a more general sense, beyond the trades, I think that any kind of self-employment is a lot more stable than what a corporation can offer you. There's an increasing view in corporations that humans are just obstacles. They're not something that actually have lives and depend on an income to not be on the streets homeless. It's easier to pay for the electricity for a computer than somebody that demands a living wage and benefits. When they say that immigrants do the jobs Americans don't want to do, all they really mean is that Americans won't do a certain job at that price, whereas immigrants, they will. Third world genetic refuse, they have no standard for themselves. I know it's not something that most people have, and even people who have it, they have to struggle to keep it. But I think that people need to learn to have an independent spirit. But that's being idealistic, and idealism is naive. So, let's start engaging in corporate warfare. Let's start costing them a lot of money. Let's start making them use their largesse to things that normally take care of themselves. Let us start shaming and ostracizing people who work for companies that import a lot of labor, that don't hire many Americans. There are many ways that we can cost them a lot of money. We just have to show the willingness to do it. And we have to let them know why we are doing it. We must let them know that we are costing them all this money because they are disloyal. We must let them know that we are doing this because they keep outsourcing jobs and keep importing labor. If we cost them money, if we bring the company to its knees, I'm sure they will be more than happy to return to a little less than 100% efficiency. Because right now they can get away with a lot. They can get away with these cost-cutting measures that increase the bottom line. Once we let them know that they can't get away with it, that they can't keep lobotomizing the workforce, the labor market, they will come to the realization that it's better to lose a little bit than to lose all of it. Next question. Besides a war, what would you say is the best way to stop the slow decline of Western culture? For example, all these genders, radical feminism, etc. Well, the fact that you said besides a war means that we probably agree that to stop the decline of the West, we need a war. I don't want to put words in your mouth, I'm just assuming, but we have to stop promoting dysgenic breeding. And the only way to stop that is to discontinue the welfare state. And by welfare state, I don't just mean it's free swipe your EBT, have 5 kids, we'll set you for life. I mean the fact that there's so much government employment that rewards mediocre behavior. Go on any major municipality's Wikipedia article and look at the economy section and look at the top employers. The top employers are a school district, the city of, the municipal government, and so on. These people aren't generally conservative because they don't rely on the fruits of their own labor. They rely on people paying their salary, taxpayers paying their salary. People work do-nothing jobs that do not exhaust them mentally or physically, so they start believing all this silly shit with the remaining capacity they have left after the day is done. I think that they realize that these jobs are inherently meaningless on some level because what was feminism all about back in the day? It was like, we need more women in the workforce. We want to work. We don't want to be in the home. I think that they're now starting to realize that work sucks and that men didn't go off for 10 hours a day just to jerk off, that they were doing these things to provide for their family. So now, instead of complaining that they don't have a job or that they're confined to the home, they're now complaining that they don't have jobs as computer programmers or engineers. But that's just a side effect of what ails the West. If women like to do computer programming, math, and engineering, you'd think that more would do it. And it's not the patriarchy that's at fault for this. Men need to start acting like men again, instead of showing deference for shrill fucking idiots who don't know what they want. If we start acting like men again, perhaps we can offset the damage done by dysgenic breeding, radical feminism, transgenderism. Think back to 10 years ago, we didn't have to deal with this shit. We were all pissed off that our men were dying in some third world shithole. Those of us that had friends and family and loved ones there, we were worried sick. It's ridiculous that such a worthless war actually delayed the onset of the cultural rot that we've been seeing. I think Archie should have died from an HIV infection. That would have been a lot more accurate. Anyway, here's the part of the show where I answer some short questions, so enjoy. I lied, here's a really long question. This one's from Joe. I trust in your opinion on things, and I know you're a person of reasonable skepticism, so here's my question. If you ever came across in real life some type of first-hand experience of seeing a UFO, how would you react? Let's just say, for argument's sake, it's one of the flying saucer UFOs doing the stereotypical abduction of some farm animals. This UFO that you see is undoubtedly real in front of you in that moment. You cannot refute its physical existence. You see it with your own eyes. And let's say, for argument's sake again, you also happen to film it very clearly. You're no more than 50 feet away. Not just some lights in the sky, but you are right there watching this go down. I guess the real question is, would you still refuse to believe your very own eyes and think there has got to be some reasonable explanation behind this? Would you show other people and try to bring the video evidence to someone with more power? Or would you feel it would be futile? Would you be scared to show it to the government out of fear for your life? Do you think it would change you to lead a life of finding the truth? I hope this doesn't come across as me seeming all tinfoil hat, because I'm definitely not. Just a curiosity. I would believe it, but I would tell only a certain amount of people. Because things like that you can tell people about and they think you're fucking crazy. It's not something you tell strangers. I would definitely tell a few close loved ones and show them the video. But it wouldn't change me in any respect to find the truth, because everything I do, I think, is related to some kind of truth-seeking. I would definitely be freaked out by the experience. I definitely would be changed by it in some way, but in terms of me being some truth-seeker, I already think that's what I do. I said I'd answer this question, and again, I've answered it in a very long, elaborate kind of way, but I keep my word. At least I do my best. John asks, what do you think caused the feminist movement, or what would be to blame for the victim entitlement mentality we see today? Extreme atomization, extreme individualism, and a premium placed on hedonistic pursuits. A denial of natural sex roles, which is also because of atomization and lack of community. If you view these things as just a manifestation of somebody's narcissism on a grander scale, it will start to make a lot more sense. Frankie asked me, what do you think makes liberalism so appealing to younger adults in modern times? They're taught all their lives that they're the greatest thing ever, and liberalism just feeds into that. Or as we like to call it, the special snowflake syndrome. They can't defend themselves as something inherently good, so they rely on the crutch of equality and egalitarianism. Everybody wants to be special and everybody wants to be unique, but nobody wants to be a failure because of it. Despite the fact that they're told that they're great individuals and because they exist, they're great, it's only the society that's corrupted. They're insecure, which is why they love equality and they love egalitarianism. I don't think that it's a problem in and of itself that young people are liberal. I think that it's a phase. As we said way back earlier in the episode, it's only a problem that they carry on this attitude well into their mature years, or what should be their mature years. It's also a problem when you have a society that takes seriously the indiscretions of youth. But I'm starting to repeat myself. Any of the answers that I gave for Sean's question can also apply to this question as well. What do you think of autistic as an edgy buzzword? From Trey. A lot of people have legitimate autism, and I don't think that it's a buzzword. I think that edgy is the worst buzzword, because edgy just means quit having an opinion that's not my opinion. And that's not to say that you use edgy in that respect. I get what you're saying. I think that when high school freshmen start using it, the word autistic, when they're referring to something that they don't like, I think at that point we should stop using it. Or when moms and grandmas start using it, that would also be a sign that we should stop. What music are you into? Are you into this whole underground stuff, or are you a dad rocker? Perhaps you prefer classical music. From Harrison. I've had phases. I've had the punk phase. I've had the dad rock phase. I've had, there's stuff that I don't listen to anymore, but there's still stuff from every phase that I've ever had in terms of my musical taste that I still listen to. I don't really care what other people think about it, so I don't talk about it that much. It's usually people who care the most about what you have to say that scream the loudest, I don't care what you think. I could piss you off and say that I like everything except rap and country, but I won't, because that's not true. In fact, I listen mostly to country and 80s pop right now. That's where my current tastes lie. I think these wrong generation morons don't get that music can exist. That's why they record it, so that it exists for more than one generation. You don't need to be around when it's new to still enjoy it. As for underground stuff, I don't really aim for things that are obscure to be obscure, just good stuff that got overlooked somehow. If something is good, it can stand on its own. I don't really pay attention to whether something's popular or not. I try not to let outside influences impact the listening experience. Next question is from RJ. What are your thoughts on conspiracy theories like the New World Order and Illuminati becoming popular beliefs among people, especially the Illuminati being linked to the entertainment industry? Do you think that there actually could be a cure for mental disabilities like autism? That was not the direction I expected that to go in. The entertainment industry is already pretty degenerate on its own, so calling it Illuminati or New World Order is pretty silly. Just attack it for what it is. Don't act like there's some conspiracy to enslave the minds of everyone, which there is some truth to that. Music is a form of mind control. It can manipulate your emotions in ways that you wouldn't otherwise feel. The same goes with film, but again, we should attack it for what it is, rather than what we want it to be. And I see some of the people in the entertainment industry playing into it because it gets people talking about it, because a lot of their music isn't interesting enough to stand on its own. I've read horrible shit about David Geffen and all these other sleazy entertainment types. It's not a surprise why people close to the entertainment industry, like singers and artists and bands, end up freaking out. I would freak out too if I were exposed to unfettered hedonism that cannot be fathomed by a normal person. As for the autism bit of your question, I don't have much of an opinion on that. Taylor wants to know, what direction do you plan on going with your radio show? Is it just a thing you're experimenting with right now, or do you have bigger plans for Common Filth Radio? What do you see your future with it? The plan is to keep doing it regularly for as long as I can. And of course, I'll take breaks at certain points, and maybe it won't be every week in the future, but I like doing this. I really enjoy answering your questions and interacting with you people. I think this show is unique. I don't think there's anything else like it, in that people ask me questions that aren't filtered through 20 different kinds of politically correct speak, and that I don't have any sponsors, so I can say what I want to say in the language I want to say it. And I wish there were more people who shared my beliefs. I'm sure there are many of them that would also get behind a microphone and talk. But as for how I would like to improve the show, I would like to eventually get into interviewing people at some point. I just posted a status about I have a list of people that I'd like to interview. And maybe at some point I'll have a guest host if I don't feel like doing the show for any period of time, but I don't see when that'll happen. Felix asks me, when and why do you think Tumblr will die as a website? I don't know. I mean, it's not really that mainstream. I mean, Yahoo paid a lot of money for it, but it's not something that grandma uses. I think that it will last because it's one of the few social websites that actually allows free speech. I know that it's in their community standards that you shouldn't do hate speech, but it's really not enforced. I certainly don't like the people that are on it, but it's really who you decide to interact with on there, who you decide to follow on there. You could really make your own experience on that website. It just gets associated with certain people. With respect to its survival, I think that as long as it stays relevant to young people, which it is to a lot of young people, it will keep growing and becoming more popular. What do you think of Krispy Kreme donuts? Are or were there any in your area? How were they, if they were? Describe the collapse of an empire. That one's from Denny, who played Denny in that great movie, The Room. Surely an empire will collapse if it does not have a Krispy Kreme, or one closes down. But in all seriousness, I did have a Krispy Kreme donut a few weeks ago. My friend got a few dozen. He's like, hey, want some Krispy Kreme donuts? He had some original glazed, which is the only kind I ever get, really. I've had other kinds before, but yeah, I really enjoy them, but, it's not something you want to eat every day. Maybe I could have done a food review of it, but no, I'm not going to do that because eating food in front of a camera is weird. Unless, of course, your name is Guy Fieri or Report of the Week. Speaking of Review Bro, that guy's incredible. He's posting new hour-long podcasts every day, it seems. New reviews on top of that as well. And his podcasts are good too. I've listened to the last few, and guy's got the gift of gab. He can talk about anything. Very well spoken, very well organized, doesn't stutter, doesn't fumble over his words, just really good. How would you describe your beliefs? Religion, politics, philosophy? Who are your intellectual influences? I said in the last episode that I'm influenced by Pat Buchanan. I think in terms of politics, he influenced me a lot, but just in terms of my views on society, Ted Kaczynski's Industrial Society and Its Future really is what got the ball rolling on that. He was a math professor before he became infamous at UC Berkeley, I believe it was. So his writings on the psychology of leftism are the most accurate ever written. Most people wouldn't admit to being influenced by somebody like that, but I'm not going to lie to you. It had a profound impact on my worldview. As for religion, I am a Christian. I would admit that I'm not a very good one, but that's what I believe. I believe that Christ is the only way to heaven, and now I'm going to get the whole Paul crowd on my ass for worshiping a dead kike on a stick. Save it. I've heard it all. Ryan sent in that question that I just answered. I forgot to say his name at the beginning of the segment, so apologize for that, but thank you, Ryan, for sending that in. I'm saving some questions from this week that I'd said I'd answer this week that I will answer for episode 5, so If I said that I'd answer one of you, don't worry, you'll hear it next week. I just ran out of time, so. Sean, Blake, Tabitha, Griffin, and Evan, I will answer the questions that you sent in next week. As always, send me a question, and I will answer it. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening. Introduction music by Le Dank. Interlude music by Smoker's Lung Sandwich, Cat Eye, Imageless, The Soupiest, Alfie Eastwick, Arth.exe, Lobo Tommy. Ending music by Killing Floor. Full versions of the songs featured on this episode can be found in the links below.